Shush, shush, shush. It's time for The Shelf. Whangarei District Libraries Radio on Beagle Radio. Oh!
Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai whakaronga mai ki The Shelf, he punua pāho mai I ngā whare pukapuka I Whangarei I Beagle Radio 88.1 FM. I pahure koutou I ngā hōtaka me ohotu ki ngā whare pukapuka I YouTube. Hello everyone, welcome to The Shelf, a podcast for Whangarei District Libraries on Beagle Radio 88.1 FM and streaming online at beagleradio.co.nz. To catch up on episodes you might have missed, subscribe to the Whangarei District Libraries YouTube channel. My name is LJ, I'm a cataloguing services librarian at Whangarei District Libraries, and I'm back for the new year with
Glenn,
yay!
How are you, LJ?
I'm pretty good. I feel like I haven't seen you for a while. Well, I've seen you, but I haven't really talked to you for a while. So
this would be a good chance to catch up.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to catch up with somebody, it's always best to do it on a live radio.
Yeah. Yeah, so today we've both had a little bit of a holiday. We're going to talk about what we've been reading over the last couple months and dig into some stuff from the library archives, some upcoming events. But before we start, I wanted to ask you, Glenn, because I've been listening to a different libraries podcast.
Right, which podcast is that?
It's the TRL podcast. I think they're Timberland Regional Library, somewhere in America. Right. And they were talking recently on an episode about things that they didn't learn in library school. And one of them put forward the premise that every librarian has a poo story.
Right.
And I know that you've been a librarian for at least 20 years. And I know that I've got several poo stories. So I was wondering if you also might have a poo story or two.
Yeah, well, just to clarify, we're not talking about our own poos, are we?
No, I hope not.
No, good. Okay, we'll just sort of lay the foundations.
Lay the foundations.
Oh,
okay.
That wasn't a joke. That wasn't on purpose. Sorry. So yes, at first I thought when you talked about things they don't teach you in library school, I was imagining reading a story to a group of children and adults. That would be one thing. But definitely cleaning poos is not something that's on the radar. No. They don't teach you that when you do the master's degree.
They don't even mention that when you apply. You know, it's not in the job description.
No, there is something probably in the job description and any other duties you are required to do.
Or duties, as the case might
duties.
be.
Nice. You've really chosen a topic that's full of like wordplay.
Yeah.
But
it's a strong start.
I have mentioned once before in an episode, I don't know if you were here or someone else, about there was the customer that returned their books, and people are good, you know, they take them from the car to the return slot in the rain in a plastic bag, protecting the community assets of the books.
Absolutely.
But what one a treasured customer had done was she'd put them into a plastic bag. Unfortunately, that plastic bag was also the bag with her dog's poo in it. And that got put through the return slot. And I believe it was Tony came to the rescue in that instance. And he was the one that had to put on the gloves and retrieve the book. But I think at that point we discovered that it was irretrievable.
Well, I was going to say, I feel
trace who was in the doo-doo.
I feel like that's above and beyond. I feel like I would have just wanted to, let's just take that straight to the hazardous waste.
Yeah. I didn't witness this one, but I have heard that someone else has seen a live poo emerge from the bottom of a trouser leg while someone was walking. I'm not going to mention any names.
No.
I don't want to upset anyone,
identifying features.
But that was above and beyond because this person that I heard got some gloves on and went and retrieved the object from the middle of the floor and disposed of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Above and beyond, and I think probably both our colleagues that did that were rewarded with the
a coffee voucher.
Coffee of the week.
Yeah, I had one in Auckland where we thought, we thought that a human was responsible, that it was some kind of targeted attack because it was right outside our staff door. Like the entrance to the back entrance, if you will, and upon reviewing the footage, discovered that it was actually a family of feral cats that had all decided to do their business, shall we say, in the same location. But I did once have to put, because in Auckland we had like a Excel spreadsheet sort of thing that we had to log jobs into.
Yeah, jobs.
And you had to put, like details. So obviously I'd had to call the emergency cleaners, and I really didn't know how to explain the severity of the situation. So I input, I said there'd been a fecal explosion in one of our toilets, because that was... I won't go into the gory details, but it was everywhere. And so the lady from the call centre had to phone me and say, "Hi, I was just received. Did you log the job for the fecal explosion?" But she was giggling about it, made her day. But so thanks for sharing.
That's right. Just some of the things you face in a public facility. Yeah,
it's the beauty of the public library is that we're open to everyone, and sometimes that's the oh man, I wanted to come up with a pun there, but I couldn't think of one fast enough. The doo-doo side, the downside, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, but so there you go.
Yeah, well, thanks to that podcast from America for
giving us ideas.
Yeah.
Right. What have we been reading? Oh, I'm going first, according to my notes.
What have you been reading?
Yeah.
So you've been on holiday. Did you do some holiday reading?
Well, yeah, I did actually. It was my goal, because I had a week off last week, and I also had a break from uni because I'm still studying part-time. And so it was my sort of thing of to sit down and read a lot of books. But also I went to see the Bloodsucker exhibition at the Auckland Museum. So if you're in Auckland, I recommend. It's sort of about blood-sucking animals, but it also talks about where like the vampire lore kind of started, and vampires in literature over the years, as well as kind of all in one with that. So I did that, but I did do some reading as well. So the first one, I follow this artist online, but I don't actually know how to say her name, if it's Lies Meetings or Lee's Meetings. I should have looked it up. But she does these like sad ghost comics, which is, a metaphor for depression, anxiety, mental illness. And she's turned them into a graphic series for teens called The Sad Ghost Club. So I read the first one because they're just really cute little art. And she's also written a non-fiction one for teens, which is a bit more of a practical. It's called The Sad Ghost Club, A Hopeful Guide for Bad Days, which is written with a teen audience in mind, with some general advice on how to deal. But the artwork's really cute if you're into that sort of thing. And I also read Never Whistle at Night, which Andy and I talked about it on an episode last year, because I had said that I was going to ask Meredith, our fiction librarian, to buy it. It's Never Whistle at Night, an Indigenous dark fiction anthology, and it's all Native American and some First Nations Canadian authors as well, with their different takes on the horror genre, which is quite an interesting one for me, because I don't really read horror, and I don't really gravitate towards short stories either. But the cool thing about it being an anthology was that that's a good way to almost like a sample box of different authors' writing styles. So fortunately, it's made my to-be-read my already mammoth to be read list kind of grow a little bit because there were quite a few authors in there that I liked. And so now I want to read more of their long form stuff. But I feel quite justified because we ordered it for the library and then I had to rush to finish it to bring it back because 2 more people are waiting to read it. So I was like, that was a good purchase.
Is that why Indigenous dark fiction, is that horror fiction?
Yeah, horror. I suppose there's sort of some fantasy themes as well, paranormal themes, but yeah, they were all slightly different. Like some of them were really like body horror, quite like visceral. Like those ones were tricky for me because I'm real squeamish. So there was one story that had like a guy got bit by a tick in it, and I was going ugh the whole time, kind of holding it from my face. But then others of them were more like from a psychological kind of standpoint, but they're all really influenced by like folk stories and things from like these individual cultures kind of informing the way that they write. But I really liked one of the stories by Marcy R. Rendon, and so now I've read the first book of her Cash Black Bear mystery series, which is the first one's called Murder on the Red River. And I think Meredith's got them on order for our library, but that they're set in the 70s. Cash is like a young woman who is friends with the local sheriff and gets involved with some like crime solving kind of stuff, and she works out in the fields, and it was quite good because it sort of got a bit of a historical fiction element to it as well, and then the author included a historical note at the end about some of the elements that were discussed. But I've read a lot of really heavy non-fiction lately, so it was I enjoyed that book because it was good to read something that has like a couple of characters and then there's a conflict and then they're going to figure out what's going on and then they figure it out, and then, you know, I wouldn't say necessarily a happy ending because a few people did get murdered along the way, but you know, there's a resolution, and I forgot how satisfying it is to just read something like that where it's like, something's happening, now we've solved it, and you know, just like a good payoff. So there's like 2 or 3 more books in that series, so I'm going to keep reading.
About the anthology you read with the horror, so I know you're not a big horror fan, but how given that they were based on Indigenous stories, did they take different storylines or paths or have different formats to what a normal quote-unquote horror might be? Like, because horror, like if you think of horror movies, they often are based on, you know, certain stereotypes that happen during the movie. For example, I don't know if this is true of all horror, but a lot of them seem to have the female character that survives through to the end.
The final girl. Yeah, the final girl
like
trope.
Did that come through, or are they all completely different? Cause
I found that they were all really different, like in terms of the way that they approached. You know, they'd obviously been given a brief of, you know, this is the type of anthology. I mean, I don't know exactly how they came to write the anthology, but I imagine that was. And so I feel they all had approached that from really different angles. So it varied quite a lot from story to story. But then, I'm not sure if maybe there would be some tropes within specific cultures or themes. I mean, the name of it, the Never Whistle at Night, comes from... like in a lot of Indigenous cultures, it's thought to be dangerous to whistle at night. But I don't know if that answers the question. But
kind of. Well, sometimes I know within cultures all around the world, there's often within myths and fairy tales, there's often a lot of recurring themes.
Yeah, recurring themes. That's the word I was looking for.
Cultures that have never even had a connection. But there seems to be some common human themes. So just curious.
Yeah, but no, so that's in the library. You can pop a hold on it. I mean, they're all in the library actually. Oh, Murder on the Red River is still. I read the ebook version, but we're getting a physical copy, and hopefully some of the others. But yeah, what have you?
Yeah,
reading?
also on holiday back in January for a few weeks, and that's I often do a bit of a dive into reading then, and I have a few go-tos that I always go to for holiday reading. One of them is I always try to read an Agatha Christie, and it's just so enjoyable. I think a little bit like you said, there's something satisfying about the familiar. It's like watching I don't know, a corny
sitcom.
action movie that you know the good guys are going to win,
Yeah.
or blah, blah, blah.
It's comforting.
It's comforting. And it's always, I don't think she's ever written any bad books.
I don't think I've ever read an Agatha Christie.
Well,
I've definitely seen some of the movies based on her work, but I can't
do.
say.
I always enjoy most of them. Some I enjoy more, but I do enjoy the time period that they're written. So she was writing, I suppose, 20s through 40s, 50s. So it's often slightly older, early 20th century. And the first book that I read that I'm going to talk about is The Razor's Edge by W. Somerset Maugham. I think that's how you say his last name. I should have Googled that as well. Written in 1944. So I often just go along the classic section and just go random almost.
Okay.
Just by feel, like I just get the vibe off a title. So this novel, The Razor's Edge, is concerned a lot with the search for meaning of life and the dichotomy. I'm reading off someone's review here. The dichotomy between materialism and spirituality. It's set in the 1920s and 30s, which is that time period that I like. Sort of between Chicago, Paris, and India. Also ends up down the south of France, around Nice. The Côte d'Azur. So that's kind of interesting. Involves characters from different worlds, but a lot of it, I just enjoy the period of time where you've got all those rich aristocrats. They have a lot of money and they don't seem to do much, so they don't have to work. I always enjoy that.
This is some kind of pipe dream of yours.
Exactly, yeah. The main focus of the story is on this character, Larry Darrell, who's returned after World War One, rejecting his pre-war values and self, and he goes on this mission to discover the meaning of life, kind of, and helping people, which is in sharp contrast to what everyone around him expects him to do. And it's set between old world Europe and new world America, where it's America's on the up and rise and everyone's getting good jobs, and involves the 1920s boom and the crash, and through the narrator of the book, which is actually the author, we get to know Larry and lots of other characters from these moneyed families. According to the Wise Internet, The Razor's Edge was one of the first Western novels to propose non-Western solutions to society's problems. So it goes into a bit of like philosophy about. So it's talking about religion and values and as I say, I like the time period. I like the not the Jane Austen, but the society kind of talk.
I was going to say that Jane Austen was a wee bit earlier.
Not the Jane Austen, but it's kind of those rich people's lives. It goes through changing times, like the Depression, and it's a drama, and there's good characters. I got a little bit bored with the philosophy, which is probably what made the book partly famous in the first place. Because it seems a bit like we've all heard about it now. But I imagine when it was written,
at the time, it was probably groundbreaking. Kind of the Razor's Edge, if you will. Sorry.
Well, The Razor's Edge, I looked at what the relevance of that is. The sharp, it comes from some Hindu sacred literature. The sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over. Thus, the wise say the path to salvation is hard.
I think I've heard of that before. It's quite a famous thing, maybe.
Probably.
Yeah.
So enjoyable book. I really enjoyed it.
How many stars?
I don't do stuff. I don't know. Yeah, 4 out of 5. Yeah. It was good. A bit about Somerset Maugham. I really should have figured out how to say his name before I did this.
How do you spell that surname?
Maugham.
Oh wow! Okay.
He's famous. A famous guy. I think he's been very popular. He wrote plays, short stories, novels. He's got a few big novels that he's most famous for, delving into understanding of human nature. He was popular, but maybe not the most critically acclaimed writer of his time. But every book I've read of his has been great. It's like some classics I pick up in there that language that you just, it's like total work. This was just a great story to read, easy reading. So I've always found his stories readable, and if you want to check it out, it's in the library in the classics section.
There you go.
The Razor's Edge, why I was attracted to it, to the vibe of it, was because when I was 13, I bought the AC/DC album called The Razor's Edge. I have no idea.
Classic literature and AC/DC.
Yeah,
the Venn diagram overlaps.
Who would have known? I wouldn't think they're the most literate band in the world.
Don't know.
But I've got, what's the word? Clear memories of me and Andrew. We both walked up to the music shop in Carmel, bought the vinyl, walked back to my house, put it on side to side, sitting on the floor in the afternoon gloom, played it straight the way through.
Oh, that's funny because I got a record player for Christmas, and my dad was when he came round to lend me some of his vinyls, even though he hasn't had a record player for years. But they are. I am assured they're on loan. They're not mine, but he was also reminiscing on Thursday night late nights in the Carmel record shop, because that's when they used to go, well, they get paid, and then they used to go, and that's when the guy that owned it would play them the new stuff. So so there you go. Cool. An institution.
It's something that people won't do now because you don't get the whole album, but I've heard other people, you sit down and you listen to the whole thing for the first time. You may have heard something on the radio, or you might not have, but you get to hear the whole side
thing
A, side
as
B,
they envisioned
with
it
friends,
to be listened.
sitting around, and you'd talk about it afterwards. We may have even played it twice, I don't know. But so I thought, since I've got that association, we've queued up here AC/DC, and the song is called The Razor's Edge.
Awesome.
And it's off the album called The Razor's Edge.
Awesome. Let's listen.
You're back on the shelf with me, Glenn, and LJ, and that was The Razor's Edge by AC/DC off their album The Razor's Edge.
Amazing. And sorry if you heard that dead space. Glenn said to me before we started, sometimes there's some tech issues on that side, and I said, never happened to me. And then today was the first time. It's the first time for everything.
Something about when we work together, things go wrong.
Well, yeah.
And we're working the later shifts today.
We are working the late shift.
And we have the Wednesday night curse.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a Wednesday night curse. I actually think it's the Glen curse. But
okay. Well, you can have it then. Whatever.
I work plenty of Wednesday nights where nothing's ever gone wrong. Anyway, touch wood for tonight. We'll see what happens. That's not an invitation to cause trouble for anyone listening.
No, just to be clear, at the start of the show we talked about going the extra mile cleaning up poos. Although we do it, we're not encouraging that behaviour. No copycats.
No, please no. All
right, what else? Tell us what else. You must have read something else on your holiday.
Well, I listened to eAudiobook. I'm almost finished. Usually when I do an audiobook, it's like 8 hours or less. This one was 17 hours.
Ooh.
Yeah, quite a mission. But because originally I had the book out, it was called, I'll tell you what it's called, shall I? How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. She's a poet, and it was her memoir. And I originally got the book out, I heard it was really good, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw somebody online, I think, say you've got to listen to the audiobook version because she narrates it. And it's really beautifully written, I think, because she is a poet. And I've got a book of her poetry on hold for me at the moment to read now that I've read her memoir. But just like the really lovely prose and descriptions of things. I suppose because she is a poet. But it's about her upbringing in Jamaica. Her parents were Rastafari, and so was she. that her dad was quite abusive at times, so it gets a little bit heavy going in the middle, but I'm almost at the end now, and there's hope and nice stuff on the horizon for her. But it was really nice to listen to. It's sort of like, I mean, not quite like she's telling you a bedtime story, because like I say, some of the stuff that's covered is a bit dark, but it was just nice to listen to. Like, I went on a few walks and was listening to it. But
she's from Jamaica, did you say?
Originally,
she got a Jamaican accent.
Slightly. She talks about that a little bit in the book, actually, because she had some scholarships to some different like international schools and stuff like that. She's sort of got a lilt to it, and like when she speaks as her mum or her dad, like things that they said, she puts on a heavier accent, but her accent, she's sort of got a hybrid accent, and it sounds like she's lived in America for a while, maybe. I'm kind of getting to the end, which is, she's in America now in the book, but I don't know where she is, in her current life today, whether she's still in America. But she does say that she doesn't think that she'll ever go back to Jamaica just because of the things that had happened. But it's really interesting. I didn't really know a lot about, beyond Bob Marley is kind of what a lot of people know about Rastafari religion and culture. So she sort of starts with a bit of backstory information about that, and then goes into the story of her life and her siblings. So we've got the physical copy of that in a non-fiction, but we do have the e-audiobook. I think it's on Borrow Box.
And you're recommending the e-audio?
Yeah.
It's quite nice to hear the person's voice.
Yeah,
right?
I think that is the nice thing about. I've listened to a couple of memoirs where the person has narrated it themselves, and I think it adds something to it, because you kind of just feel like you're just sitting at their feet listening to them talk about their life story. Which
especially
is kind
if they've
of
got a nice voice. Like if you connect with their voice. Yeah,
that's my thing with audiobooks. Like, I've always got to play the sample, because if I don't like your voice, I can't go there. But so that's one that I recommend. And then I've got a few quick poetry highlights. I've read a few poetry collections. So I read Lunchtime Thoughts of a Gallery Attendant at the End of the World by Vaughan Gunson, who's a friend of the pod and local vinyl dealer. I've bought a few vinyls from him lately.
Oh, you'll be his favourite person now, because you can go to Vine on vinyl, is it? And,
Vine Street Vinyl,
record player person?
I went to his Boxing Day sale and spent quite a bit of money.
What, give us a couple of examples. Can you recall what you bought?
I bought Billy Idol Rebel Yell. Found that in the $10 pile. Was stoked. I really this is such a random left field. One of Elvis's gospel albums was on the $10 pile, which I was so excited about, because I love it. I think it's called His Hand in Mine. I can see the picture in my head, but I love that album. It's so random. And then I also got Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses. That was a nostalgia buy. So that was my favourite album as a teen. Stevie Nicks. Which album was it? Has Belladonna on it, I think. Mm-hmm. Again, I can see the picture in my head, but I can't think. The Cure's new album, Songs of a Lost World. Love, rate. Probably my most listened to. And what else did I get? I've been back since Wu-Tang Clan's Greatest Hits.
Okay.
And I've also been back recently and bought 9 Inch Nails' first album, Pretty Hate Machine, because that's my favourite 9 Inch Nails album.
Trying to think what. I was trying to think what 9 Inch Nails song I used to hear a lot. It might have been on the album.
I think so.
What's the big single?
Like Closer and stuff like that were on later albums, but Head Like a Hole was on Pretty Hate Machine.
I think that might be the one.
Yeah, that's a great album. And
so that's a pretty diverse mixture. I knew you were a fairly diverse person. So you've got Elvis's gospel ones interested. I watched a documentary about him recently, as well as I watched that stylized movie about him. Was that the super
No, I didn't.
glossy looking thing?
Haven't watched it, but
the gospel album, I have a feeling he did that, if that's the one. Mid-60s or something like that?
yeah, I think it was 1960 that it came out.
So he did a couple of them anyway.
Yeah, he did a few. Yeah, but this particular one
is
a favourite of mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, recommend Vaughan's poetry book. I know you've read that as well.
I'm just quietly pleased to see the young people are still listening to Elvis.
I'm quietly pleased that you
that.
think that I'm a young person, Glenn.
It's just trying to be patronising.
Tōku Papa by Ruby Solly. I also read another poetry collection that I enjoyed. And then Hopurangi Songcatcher, Poems from the Maramataka by Robert Sullivan. And this is the second year in a row that I've checked out a book, and then while I've had it out, it's been announced that it's part of the Ockham Awards long list randomly. So Hopurangi Songcatcher is on the long list for the Ockham Book Awards this year.
Cool.
But yeah, I did the same thing last year with one of Rebecca Priestley's books. I checked it out, and then she made the long list as well. So, clearly I've got
finger on the pulse.
Fabulous taste.
And Robert Sullivan has a connection with our library.
Yes.
There's the poem that was commissioned, I think, for the building of the new Central Library.
That's right.
That was hanging in the front of the library in what is now the Leonard Room, and now it's upstairs in Te Pūānanga, the Māori Services Room. And a year or two ago, he was here with a local poet, Briar Wood, and gave a really awesome...
I think that was just before I started.
Poetry recital.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so that's a good book too. And you've got another book, Glenn?
I do, yeah. It's a memoir, so it's a pretty random choice, this one. So I was on holiday, and this book was just at the place I was staying. An old book, another old book. This is more new than my last one. Yeah. So the last one, Razor's Edge 1944. I'm really in modern times now. This is Guerrilla Surgeon, a World War II memoir by Lindsay Rogers, published 1957.
Oh, look at you go.
So this was a pretty old copy that I had. Actually, you can still buy it new, even in large print. So it's still kicking around. Yeah. It's by the New Zealander Lindsay Rogers, exciting, interesting memoir. I think a lot of people, a lot of older folks will probably already be familiar with this book, so I think it was quite famous in its day. It's the extraordinary story of Lindsay Rogers, who was a New Zealand surgeon serving in the army initially in Africa as a surgeon.
Oh, yeah, that rings a bell.
He got frustrated with the situation in Africa. I mean, maybe it wasn't enough happening for him, and he requested to go on like a special service kind of mission, and ended up working in what was then Yugoslavia, working as a surgeon among the partisans, which is a group of people fighting, one of the many groups that were fighting in Yugoslavia at that time. And so he was there to fight with them, but mainly as a surgeon to tend to the wounded, and he also acted as a sort of a liaison between the partisans and the Allies side. So it's his story. I mean, it's actually written fairly soon after World War II, 1957. It's surprisingly, it's not. I was recommended. Oh, you should read this. I was like, really? I know I've heard enough World War II. It was my first thought, but I picked it up and I was actually kind of blown away. It was pretty exciting, inspiring. It's a short chapters, mostly chronological, but not necessarily. He's suddenly having to just flee from where he is. He's enduring attacks, and it's a story about really the people of Yugoslavia, their bravery amongst the men, but also the women. Pretty harrowing at times, like a war story. But his job, he was there to save lives, not take lives primarily. So that kind of was a nice angle on things. and he had to operate and help people in the most crazy conditions, like in makeshift shelters with little or no equipment. They were having to hide secret hospitals in forests and in caves, often working with untrained assistants, language barriers, different ideologies all around him, but he was just really there to help people through it all. And he tells the whole story kind of modestly, and it held my attention the whole way through. It was very readable, despite the fact there were some quite lengthy descriptions of his operations. So I imagine he was sort of writing it. I was imagining, like, why are you going into so much detail about how you've separated this from that, and how you managed to cut it all off with only a pair of scissors and a bit of twine, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess he was possibly writing for other frontline surgeons at the time, and I believe I think he was
creates a visceral of what it really was like.
Maybe, and what I realised is from reading it that how little I know about that part of the world. Yugoslavia is now separated into various countries, including Croatia, but I really know almost nothing about it. Nothing about its involvement in World War II. And I realised how sort of centric I was towards England, France, Germany, New Zealand, Pacific. Yeah. So a real eye-opener. I'm ashamed to say I'd never heard of the partisans, and just absolutely blown away by the description of the hardships and the poverty experienced by the people during the war. Yeah. Pretty heartbreaking, but at the same time, kind of heartwarming. So highly recommended. Really interesting.
Cool.
So as I say, a bit harrowing at times.
Yeah.
I started to describe it to Katie, my wife, and she's like, "No, I can't
don't want to know
all those sorts of things because it's just too upsetting." Yeah. No,
the
horrors of what goes on.
Yeah. Right.
Now we could shift to we could lighten the moment here. I've chosen. I went searching for a song about a surgeon to match the book Gorilla Surgeon by Lindsay Rogers, and by consensus we came up with the Thompson Twins' Doctor.
Yeah, because as soon as you said doctor, that's where my brain went.
Well, let's play it. Let's have some light relief. So this is the Thompson Twins.
Awesome. Hopefully it works this time.
Doctor. There's a little bit of new wave for your Wednesday. And that was the Thompson Twins' Doctor. And LJ, sitting next to me, has been digging into the Whangarei Libraries archives. I should say, before I carry on, you're listening to The Shelf.
You are.
On Beagle Radio, 88.1 FM.
Yeah.
Thanks, Beagle.
Yeah.
Tell us, what have you been finding, LJ, in the library archives?
Okay, I'm working on a bit of a project with the Heritage Librarian, just like recataloguing our library archives, which is really fun because, well, fun to me, but I found out about quite an interesting character, Mr. P.C.M. Alcock. So according to the National Library of New Zealand record, Mr. P.C.M. Alcock, or Peter Clement Maloney Alcock, was a literary critic, poet and lecturer in English at Massey University in Palmerston North, and was particularly interested in authors who wrote in English when English was not their first language. He was born in 1922 and he died in 2007. And also I feel sort of a kinship, because according to an Alexander Turnbull library record that I found on Papers Past from 1954, he was also head of cataloguing for the Alexander Turnbull Library at one time. But he was also the librarian of Whangarei Public Library from 1956 to 1960.
So that's librarian in old-fashioned library speak kind of means he was the boss.
Yeah, like library manager. So Paula, our current library manager, is equivalent today.
So old days, there was just one librarian. Everyone else was the assistant librarian or a library assistant.
And different things like that. And so there's quite a few articles about him from the Northern Advocate. There's one that caught my eye from the 8th of March 1956 was new ideas to popularise the library. Ways of getting people to books and books to people are to be adopted by the Whangarei Public Library. This was decided by the Whangarei Borough Council last night when it adopted several recommendations by the librarian, Mr. P.C.M. Alcock. But steps recommended for outside the library, one of them was a stall at the A&P show. And I don't know if we've been doing a stall at the A&P show ever since then, but it is something that we do now, at least
That's
in the
right,
time
yeah.
that I've been here.
So that was from 1956.
1956, he came up
Interesting.
with that. That was one of his main recommendations, as well as displays in department stores and the cinema foyer and other
Wow.
things like that. So he was quite forward-thinking. He also did his first annual report in 1957. Librarians' views on problems of future was the headline, and essentially what he was saying is that we're no longer a small country library, but we're serving a growing urban area, and it was also the central book and information source for the whole of the north, and so he was saying something needs to be, we need to be supported here. But the big thing that initially caught my eye was this article that we've got, and it's just from an unidentified newspaper, no date, but it was just a short thing. Censored librarian resigns. Owing to a sharp division of opinion over a librarian's rights to order books without the control of the library committee, the librarian of the Whangarei Public Library, Mr. P.C.M. Alcock, has resigned. His resignation was accepted at a special meeting of the Borough Council. And it goes on a little bit, but then I found like a full article, which was dated Northern Advocate, 27th of September 1956, and it's a little bit of a mystery because he did resign and it was accepted, but I haven't been able to find. He obviously was allowed back. He obviously came back because he was the librarian. We know that he was the librarian until 1960. Yeah, or I think 1959, like end of 1959, and so I'm not quite sure, but he. So it was accepted at this special meeting, and so he was basically saying, I'll read this. What he wanted was that for the librarian to have sole, unfettered, and absolute control of books ordered, periodicals, and newspapers subscribed to, subject only to the existing price ceiling, which was £3. And so he said, I'm willing, not all librarians may be, to hear the advice only of a small subcommittee subject to the very real exigencies attaching to weekly outgoing orders depending on the weekly receipt of email advice on new books. But the last word is decidedly not that of the library committee, but of the librarian. On no grounds other than those dubious variables of good taste and sexual morality, these change vastly in different times and places, should there be any move whatever to censor incoming material, whether overtly propagandist or not, on political or religious grounds. And so he was talking about freedom of thought, and he said he was astonished and incredulous to hear no less a person than the mayor suggest that we establish a process identical with those of a totalitarian state, the librarian continued. In the event of any action by the Whangarei Borough Council in this respect, I feel the Library Committee's move would be regarded with no slight interest by the National Library Service, the New Zealand Library Association of New Zealand, the New Zealand Council for Civil Liberties, and of course citizens in general. Yes, it was quite scathing.
So what he's asking for is the ability to buy what he thinks is in good taste, and it sounds like the Library Committee and others are coming in and saying, censoring what he's allowed to buy.
So
but we don't know exactly what books are being censored.
So basically he was saying, like, I'm the expert in my field, the Library Committee was not made up of librarians, and it was interesting because Leanza does get a mention, which is the Library Information Association, New Zealand Aotearoa now, but at the time it was the NZLA, New Zealand Library Association. This is precursor to the name change, but it sounds like this was kind of going on in other areas, because it said they had expressed a desire to ignore the administrative and policy recommendations, they being the committee, of the only professional body of librarianship in this country, the NZLA, which together with the National Library Service, which is now the National Libraries, had been engaged for 20 years in a wholly successful and world-famous among librarians struggle. This has been an uphill and pioneering battle to provide the people of New Zealand with books, periodicals and information they could never otherwise have hoped to see. And the other thing that stuck out to me, it's quite a long article, so I won't read the whole thing, but you can, if you want to look up in the microfiche, Northern Advocate, 27th September 1956, you can read the whole, it starts on page 1 and then goes on to the next page, but rank discourtesy was what the mayor said about his letter that he wrote. So he said the librarian had written a letter in a language he, the mayor, was not prepared to accept, in which he described as rank discourtesy. When a man was writing a letter to his employers, he should at least put it in terms which were courteous. I would love to read that letter. And yeah, basically said the librarian had only himself to blame. Sorry that a young man had found himself in this position. But he did feel that there was a place for Mr. Alcock in library work in New Zealand. And so they said basically they were going to re-advertise the librarian role, and that Mr. Alcock was at liberty to reapply for it if he wanted to. So I don't know, but I wonder if that is what happened possibly, and that's why he ended up back as the public librarian. But yeah, I was like,
that's interesting.
Who is this man? So yeah, quite controversial.
It would be interesting to know whether he did actually just get his job back.
Yeah,
but
I've tried to find,
I'd love to
but
know
I
what
couldn't.
books the committee was.
Yeah, that as well, and I would like to know more about this uphill battle. So we'll see if I can find anything else about it. I'll do some more digging, but also just really quickly, but in 1959, speaking of records, we got a long-playing LP library, long-playing record lending library, began operating at the Whangarei Public Library for a 6-month trial. That was under his reign, not reign, but his tenure. And also 9th of May 1959 was when customers were able to return their books by chute after hours.
Wow.
There
Our
was,
first after hours chute was added to the old library.
What was now known as the old library. And then there's an article, 12th of December 1959. A man to make his mark in Whangarei is Peter Alcock, who has been borough librarian since February 1956, and he resigned his post to join the staff of the new Palmerston North branch, or new at the time, branch university at the start of the next term. And so it said, Mr. Alcock has been mainly responsible for the introduction of a number of innovations in the Whangarei Public Library, and there's no doubt his efforts have been appreciated by a large number of subscribers and many who are not regular subscribers, but who have used the library's referenced department. And it said that since he took over, a variety of books have been available, frequent displays of visual artworks, local and overseas origin, system of interchange books, which I assume interloan, possibly, not sure, and a collection of gramophone records, and that he had taken great interest in community arts service. He served on the committee, and the Whangarei Film Society profited from his experience because he was production assistant of the National Film Unit in the 40s. But yeah, he had a Master of Arts in English, he had a Diploma of Journalism, and a diploma from the New Zealand Library School as well. So yeah,
wow,
I'm a fan.
Quite the guy,
yeah.
So basically, in 1959, life became busy in Whangarei to warrant the introduction of a after-hours shoot.
Yeah. I thought that was but it's also interesting to see what we dedicated like newspaper articles too. There was one in there about like new lights in the children's area or something.
Right.
I thought that would never get what do you call it, inches in the paper now. But there you go.
Very
We're
good.
almost
Oh, wow.
out of time, but
You can be the library PI.